One of the great joys and privileges in my role as lay ministry advisor in the Diocese of Chelmsford is through my work as part of the vocations team. Here I get to meet fellow disciples of Christ and to hear and share their stories, to learn about their Christian journeys so far, to explore with them where it might be that God is calling them next, and to help them discern how they might use their unique Spirit-given gifts to best serve God and his people. Some people have amazing conversion stories, real-life examples of dramatic and sudden events in their lives which turned them away from their previous ways and pointed them towards Christ. These moments cause them to rethink their lives, rethink their direction of travel. Hearing such stories can be very moving, inspiring, and incredibly humbling. For others, God's call is a slower drip feed of events, a slow burn or gradual build-up of a gut feeling that God is calling them to do something else, to serve him and to bring about his kingdom in another way. And whilst we all might desire a big, bright neon sign of a call flashing in the sky, the deep down niggle is persistent, but doesn't go away, and we usually get there in the end. Neither type of story and all variations in between is the right way. No experience is the best way or even the better way to receive God's call. And there is no hierarchy in call. For some people, a dramatic event is necessary to wake them up and jolt them into action. For others, a gentle, constant niggle works best. Our call is as individual as we are. In our reading from the book of Acts today, we definitely hear about one of the former dramatic types of wake-up call from God. The story concerns a man named Saul. Saul was a man who was going about with letters from the high priest to round up those who followed Christ and to bring them back to Jerusalem, bound as prisoners. Their prospects following this capture did not look good from their point of view. God needed to do something big to stop Saul in his tracks. And so we read from our reading in Acts today in verse 3. A light from heaven flashed around him. He fell to the ground and heard a voice saying to him, Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? Saul was travelling to Damascus when there was this bright light. Saul fell from his horse and heard the voice. It was a real assault on all his senses, sight, sound, pain, the likely taste of blood in his mouth, and the dust from the road filling his nostrils. This was not an event Saul could ignore. Furthermore, in verse 8 we read, Saul got up from the ground, and though his eyes were open, he could see nothing. So they led him by the hand and brought him into Damascus. Saul was left blinded from the experience and needed the help of others. The sudden loss of sight means he's not able to carry on his journey. He is forced to stop. When we, as people who are used to being able to use our eyes to navigate the world around us, when we lose the ability to see, we become totally dependent on others to take care of us, to lead us. Saul would not have enjoyed relying on others to take care of him. After all, it was Saul who'd gone to the high priest. He was likely to have been the leader of the group of men who were on their way to Damascus to persecute the early Christians. He would not have liked to have had to ask others for help. So in this blinded and helpless state, Saul was forced to think about his actions, to reconsider his life choices. I suppose a bit like an extreme naughty step or time out, where his lack of vision inhibited his actions and he was forced to confront his life choices. Eventually, one of the followers of Christ, a man called Ananias, someone who Saul had originally come to capture, comes to visit Saul and restores his sight. Saul responds to this in verse 20. Immediately he began to proclaim Jesus in the synagogue, saying, "He is the Son of God." Saul begins to call himself Paul and becomes the most influential figure in the early Christian church, spreading the good news of Jesus Christ wherever he went. For me, the key to this story and all stories of conversion or call to discipleship is not the story of the call itself, but how we respond. People who experience a conversion experience have a choice at the end, how they want to act on what has happened. They can turn to Christ to seek out the will of God and to carry it out obediently and possibly sacrificially. Or they can ignore the call and carry on, business as usual. It is up to each one of us as individuals to respond. Our response will be as unique as our call and as unique as the gifts the Spirit has given us. Our vocation as Christians is less about our call itself and more about our response to that call. The call is just the beginning of the vocation journey, highly significant, but it is the response that we first become true disciples of Christ. In our gospel reading for today, we have the story of Jesus' third appearance to his disciples following his resurrection on Easter morning. The disciples had gone fishing and caught nothing. Jesus appears on the beach and tells them to try fishing from the other side of the boat. They obediently try this, and suddenly their disappointing fishing trip is turned around and they can scarcely contain their haul on their little fishing boat. At this point, Peter realizes who it is that has spoken to them. He realizes it is Jesus. And his response upon seeing the risen Christ is to jump into the water, so eager is he to get to Jesus. He throws caution to the wind, although John is careful to point out that Peter dresses first. He leaves the haul of fish behind and comes crashing through the water in his excitement to reach Jesus. What a wonderful response. I mentioned earlier how the call happens does not matter. The idea of there being no hierarchy in call. We are all siblings in Christ together. What sets us apart is our response, what we do as a result of being called. So, as you go out into the world today, I wonder how you will respond to Christ's call upon your life.